Okay, hello and thank you again all for coming. Simon mentioned I'm going to talk about, if I go backwards, talk about the successful application of the business performance cycle in a multinational FTSE 250 technology business. This business operates a number of business divisions. They have a number of product lines out of a variety of global regions. Sorry if I'm in your way, Richard. So this application was in the creation of a 5-year revenue plan. It was a plan that was built to achieve the goals of the business whilst aligning all stakeholders and encouraging commitment into actually what the plan was saying. We had some key objectives in the process. The idea was to replace the disparate plans that were being built up through the various business divisions and were all being consolidated up into one plan. The idea was to align all of the users of the plan onto what actually the key drivers of revenue were. So this meant there was much more ownership of the results of the planning process because people could trace their inputs right through to the company outputs. And also saved a lot of time and effort which was spent consolidating all of the plans, making them in a consistent format and putting them together for review. So another challenge we faced was making sure that the targets that were set and also any changes that were made to the plan, any updates, were actually communicated quickly and easily throughout the business. Okay? So our start point was to go and consult with all of the divisions around the business who were contributing to the plan and make sure that everyone was in alignment as to what there was in terms of a simple company-wide framework. And that's the business driver diagram that Simon spoke about before. The business driver diagram was very, very effective at taking out lots of the complexity that existed within the planning process. But what was really important was making sure we were measuring the key drivers. So obviously that's the start point of our business performance cycle. I'll give you a quick overview now of walking you through what the key drivers for this business were, both internal, external drivers we have here. We've got financial and non-financial. On this business driver diagram, the orange boxes that you can see are the planning inputs, so the inputs built into the plan. We've got some interim outcomes, which are the dark blue boxes here, and then our final end goal, this being a revenue plan of revenue, which is our light blue box on the right-hand side. This was a technology company who provide technology into lots of consumer devices. I'm sure, well, I know lots of you have brought smartphones, you've brought tablets with you, you probably actually own many of those. One of the key drivers of growth in this business was growth in the end consumer devices markets. The other key driver of growth was actually how many technologies can go into those devices, that ever more technologies going into those smartphones, into those tablets. We've got Wi-Fi technology, camera technology. There's now technology to link your phone up to your watch, and forevermore. So these the drivers on the left-hand side here are those that I've mentioned. We've got the device volume, which is our end consumer market device volume, smartphones being one example. We've got an attach rate, which is a percentage applied to those consumer device markets for which technologies go into it. So tablets are an example. The attach rate of cameras is probably slightly less than 100%. Not every tablet has a camera in it, but there'll also be an attach rate of that Wi-Fi technology, of the technology linking it to the smart watch or whatever else you have. So applying that attach rate of a technology to the consumer device market, we end up with the available market for a particular technology in a particular end market. To that, we can apply the company's market share and get our expected volume of sales into a particular technology. That can then be split across products using a product mix. So split across products we've currently got in our product list and other products that we might have on our roadmap. Once we know our breakdown of expected sales by product, we can apply the average selling price that we're going to anticipate for those products to give us our eventual revenue outcome. Making clear the assumptions of the end markets meant everyone was aligned on what the external growth view of the business was. Making clear the assumptions around market share and product mix, so associating our market share to particular products, meant the responsibilities were very, very clear and everyone was aware of what their area of influence was and they knew the decisions that they were going to have to make to hit the targets that were set. Okay, so just to give you a bit of a background on the planning process that this business went through, they had a number of windows in which a bottom-up plan was built. So all of the business divisions would build a bottom-up plan. That plan was then locked down and submitted to senior management for review. So senior management could then go through a top-down view of the plan, and they could start to flex some assumptions and to drive dialogue on what targets should be and what the plan should eventually look like. We're going to join the process when I get into it in a moment, partway through. It's after one of the cycles in which the plan's been submitted by the divisions up to senior management. So the start point that senior management wanted, they wanted simple and visual analysis to be able to review. They wanted to be able to review the plan, they wanted to be able to make amendments to it, and they wanted to be able to then communicate those amendments down through the business. This very simple analysis, we've got revenue both in the current year, which comes from their latest annual forecasts, and in the last year of our 5-year plan. So in this case, it's 2019. That revenue is broken out across a number of business divisions, and what senior management really focused on was the growth rates, so the revenue growth rates across the various divisions. And on the right-hand side there, for comparison, we included the growth rates of their end markets to see how they compared and see how they were performing against the market. So for setting the targets, the senior management started with a very simple view of how revenue was built up using some key high-level drivers. So the high-level drivers they were using was available market volume, they were using volume market share and the average selling price. What we have here is an aggregated view. So this has been aggregated for all of those drivers from the bottom of the business right up, and we're looking at a total company view for all of those business divisions and for all of the products within them. Just a bit of context, that if we look at the chart in the bottom left, the grey background shows the plan as loaded in from the business divisions. So that's the one that's been locked in, and the blue that we have here is the plan that the senior management are going to start to play around with, and we'll see how the differences between those are reflected in a moment. So here, the first step that senior management took was to decide that the business could do much better, particularly in their average selling price. See, the available market's projected to grow, their market share's projected to grow, but there's going to be a steep decline in the average selling price throughout the plan. So they started with their interrogation by looking at that average selling price and drilling in a bit further to see how the average selling price, and particularly the decline in average selling price, was broken down across the divisions. Looking at this closely, you may not be able to see it at the back of the room, but you can see the productivity area, which is this one in here, which has business divisions including document imaging, which is printers and the like, and personal computers, so PCs. Their average selling price was declining the most. We've got a 10% compound annual growth rate, a minus 10% compound annual growth rate, I should say. So productivity area became a key focus area for the senior management. So having determined the area of focus, what senior management could do is drill in, start to make changes, tweak some of the assumptions to see what it would look like for the business. So in this case, they encouraged the productivity area to shoot for much higher average selling prices. They weren't particularly concerned with how the productivity area were going to achieve the higher average selling prices, whether it's through marketing, changing product mix, changing pricing structures. What they wanted to do was set the challenge, let the business divisions decide about what was and wasn't possible, and then for the business divisions to make decisions on how to action the change. So once the new target was set, it can be consolidated up. We can see a full business view, and it can start to be then interrogated by the business managers, so in the particular divisions. They can understand the challenge, they can respond to the challenge, and it just starts the dialogue around how the targets might be met. There were a number of views built that they could look through, providing we had big picture views, we had views that could be drilled into to analyse the targets, just so that they could quickly understand the overall challenge. This time we can see that the change that the senior management made has increased in the bottom table the revenue in 2019 by 42 million. $42 million that is, and we can see that's coming exclusively from the productivity area. Business management can then understand where the changes were needed, and really importantly, this could be done in minutes. It wasn't a process that took days, it wasn't a process that took weeks, but actually senior management could start to flex the assumptions and communicate that around the business very quickly. So having reviewed the senior management challenge, what the business divisions could then do is go back and revisit their plans and start to change some of their assumptions to try and meet the targets. I'm going to look at document imaging, which, as we saw, is a division within that productivity area. And the document imaging division manager could go and look at his end markets. He's got end markets of different types of printer. He's got lasers, scanners, he's got inkjet printers. The focus here was on the laser printers. Inkjet printers weren't an area where they were providing current technology, but what they could do is include that market on their plan to monitor it, track it, and make sure that they were looking out for any new opportunities that might arise in those markets. As a reminder, the bottom-up plan that we're seeing there was built up from the business driver diagram, so from that one consolidated view of the business. We saw the device volume input. So the device volume input there was the end market that we just looked at of lasers. And I'll walk very briefly through market share and product mix to see how they could respond to that challenge that we saw set. So we're focusing on lasers. The market's been split in the plan between high-end, mid-range, low-end. And we've got different types of technology that have been defined in the plan as being available in the laser printers. There's Wi-Fi, there's printer hardware, there's printer software, and there's direct renderer. So the management can assign market shares to each one of those technologies independently. And then when we flow through, we can then focus on one technology within one end market. Now we're looking at printer software within the lasers market. So the business manager wasn't just able to go in and raise the average selling price. He didn't have responsibility, and the average selling price was set by the market forces. But what he did have was a number of products at his disposal, which he could play into this market in different mixes. So here we've got an IPS product, which at the moment is the only product that's going to be used. He also has in the roadmap a PDF IPS product. If we look at those a bit more closely, we can see that the IPS product has quite a drastic decline in average selling price, from $5.85 down to $3.88. The PDF IPS product is going to enter the market about $6, have much less of a decline to about $5.79 in the out year. So what the management decided to do was phase out the IPS product. Make a decision to phase that product out and bring in our PDF IPS product during the plan. This was their response to senior management, which had the effect then of raising the overall average selling price in their area as the product mix changed. So having made that change, played in a new product into the market from their roadmap, we can then go back to see a consolidated view again at the whole business view of the plan. So this is the plan as built from the bottom-up business divisions that we've just seen entered. This time the grey is the last plan they had that was locked. So again, the plan that was submitted to senior management previously, so they can investigate the deltas, what the effect of the changes that they've made. In reality, this would happen, or this happened across all of the divisions simultaneously. So there were lots of changes in lots of different areas that then could be analysed. These could be presented they were presented at a management meeting. They had a big pack, a big management pack that came out of the model here, and they were able to go into their management meetings, discuss these numbers, and then submit them again to senior management for review. So the speed with which they could do it meant that they could run a number of cycles of their planning process. They could go from review, challenge set, bottom-up plan built, over and over again, and start to speed up the cycle and actually speed up their whole business performance cycle. It was important then that they were measuring the key drivers. They had the analysis and insight. They presented a view which then drove dialogue around how to set challenges, how to respond to challenges, and the business divisions could make decisions about what they would do to action those challenges set.
So we're going to spend the last 15 minutes or so having a panel discussion here with our resident experts, give you the opportunity to ask some questions you may have, and I have pre-prepared a few just to get us started. So first of all, welcoming our three to the stage here, we have Naomi Smith from SEMA, we have Richard Giles from De Beers, and our own guru, as he's now known according to Simon, Andrew Molesley, who many of you know. So I'm going to open up the questions while you all have the chance to think of what you may like to ask yourselves. With you first, Richard, if I may. So in your experience, we've talked today about the business performance cycle. Which aspect do you think finance functions potentially perform worst at?
I think what Simon said earlier on about dialogue and commitment, that resonated quite strongly, because I do think we have a reputation within our businesses as being quite distant. We have to try and break down that resistance. We're quite fortunate in De Beers. De Beers is 85% owned by Anglo-American PLC, and we've got a strong push from the most senior levels in the organisation to far better understand our business operation, which is great because it gives us the opportunity to try and break down that distance. But it's definitely there. There's definitely a perception that we don't understand the real world. And I was in Antwerp recently. We ran a workshop precisely for this reason, to understand, break down in precise detail the process, the operating process of our facility in Antwerp. And what was very interesting, at the start of that process, there was a comment made by a senior manager of that facility. He was referring in the third party to them in London, who send down these targets with no awareness of the business and expect us to meet them. And I shuffled uncomfortably in my seat because I realised he was talking about me. And the irony was that we were there for exactly that point. We'd realised the fact that we didn't have sufficient understanding of the operations. It's interesting when you think about what James just presented to us, playing tunes on revenue. Very useful, but without the dialogue and the interaction with the business, there are operational constraints as to whether the operation can actually deliver that volume. It's all well and good saying, great, we're going to seize 80% of the market share. You need to know whether your operations can practically deliver that from a manufacturing perspective. And so that's where the dialogue really comes out. It may be that you say, right, the right approach is to phase out this product line and to build this product line. You need to have that dialogue with the business. I think we've been pretty lousy at that in the past. And I think we as an organisation are finding the benefits from starting to do that. So I think the dialogue and commitment piece that Simon mentioned at the outset, that's really crucial. We have to get closer to the business, not sit in our ivory tower and just come up with theoretical scenarios. But that's what I think was really useful about that scenario, was the two-way aspect of it, the top-down and bottom-up approach. Throw a scenario back to the business and say, is this achievable? But before you can do that credibly, you have to have some degree of understanding about what the operational constraints are in the first place.
I think that's absolutely right. We were having that very same conversation around our table earlier about how, you know, the role of the CFO is changing and it's far more involved in actually the running and the strategic direction of the business. Andrew, would you agree from your experience?
I was going to say that. I mean, I've been doing this kind of work since the late 80s, and at that time trying to actually, you know, explain what we did at Metapraxis. We did a lot of stuff with graphs, kind of trying to get people to look forward. We were selling to finance people who at that time were really kind of just, you know, number counters. They felt their role was just to get the numbers right and present them, you know, in schedules that told the truth. Yeah. And we've moved a long way in the last sort of 25 years. So we've now got sort of financial planning and analysis as a recognised sort of function within businesses. We've got, you know, insight teams in large organisations. So, you know, the world has sort of gone on a journey, but there's always more to do. And I'd love to see finance people actually go out and speak to the business and see the factories and and really understand what the business is trying to achieve and what the constraints are, as Richard said.
Okay, good. Thank you. Naomi, I think if we stick with the business performance cycle that we started talking about, in reference particularly to the measurement area, the guiding principles that you've been working on at CIMA, how do you see that helping in influencing that cycle?
So I spend an enormous amount of my time travelling the world talking to big employers, small employers, public sector employers about what they're going to need from their finance functions in 10, 20 years' time, so that we can feed that back into our CIMA syllabus and make sure that our students and our members through their CPD are sort of continuing to be relevant to the profession. And it's the thing I hear more than anything from those recruiting finance people and from board level people wanting more from their finance function is, please can you start to assess them on their communication? It's the single most powerful thing that we could ask you to do, and it's just consistent. No matter which market we're in, which region we're in, which size of organisation we're talking to, that's the single biggest thing we hear. And so we've made sure that we sort of fed that into these principles that we launched 2 weeks ago, which sort of seek to define the profession and set out its sort of key values and norms, because we do quite a lot in CIMA, as all the institutes do, to make sure that there's a very steady supply of well-qualified and competent finance professionals to the market. But we haven't really done much on the demand side, and lots of organisations not really understanding the value that they could be extracting from their management information and from their finance teams. So we've sort of done quite a big piece of work to try and create that demand and make sure that people have got jobs, but the key enabler is going to come from finance professionals really beginning to up their game in terms of tailoring communication to the decisions at hand as well as to the decision maker. We heard today quite a bit about that. Don't treat all people the same. Make sure that you're tailoring your communication style as well as the types of metrics that are needed.
I certainly found that from my own personal experience, that most of the FDs and the CFOs that are the most successful are the ones that have the best communication skills and are able to adapt within the business and communicate to the people actually running that business. Great, thank you. Okay, shall I ask, I have some more questions myself, but can I open up to the floor to see if we have any questions out there?
There's certainly merit in keeping it as simple as possible. It's back to that Einstein quote, isn't it, Matt? Make things as simple as possible, but not simpler, and that should be a maxim that we try to apply.
I think that goes back to some of what we were saying at John Lewis about not having too many drivers when you're trying to work out what really is key to that business. But I'll hand over to our experts on that one.
It has to be a number.
5. It's a very difficult question. I mean, there's not going to be a one-size-fits-all answer. You're absolutely right. It has to be manageable. You can't possibly have a dashboard that is going to communicate sensibly to your board with 100 KPIs. To Simon's point, I was sat in one of those board meetings last Thursday, presented, as always, with a 90-page presentation, and you can just see that we're tearing our hair out. But it's precisely that problem, that despite the board communicating to the business, this is too much, we haven't actually given a clear enough steer to the business. For the avoidance of all doubt, we want to know these 5 things. And I think actually senior management needs to take some of the responsibility here. It's no good just making the observation, you're giving us too much, this is all noise. I think you've actually, as a board, got to invest the time to say, right, let's actually take a day out and spend time agreeing between ourselves what we expect the business to create. Because I think we've all been in this situation that you have a board meeting and a question is asked and you send your finance guy off and the next board meeting he reports back. And that question then isn't asked again for 2 years, but he always includes it in the pack. And gradually the pack gets fatter and fatter and fatter. And then they say, put this stuff in the appendix because we hardly ever look at it. And suddenly it becomes important again and it gets called to called to the front. And you feel very sorry for that poor accountant who's only doing his job because he knows the second he doesn't include that in the board pack, it will become the KPI for the month. So I think boards have a responsibility for actually saying, what do we think the KPIs are? And recognise the fact that the reason you've got 50 accountants is because you asked a question 6 months ago and you didn't clearly communicate, okay, I'm done with this. We're fine. You don't have to keep producing this. Until an accountant is told to stop, he'll keep doing it.
But surely you should be measuring and reporting particularly reporting the things that are topical at that point in time, and that will change as the organisation changes and develops. I think it's probably wise to try and measure as much as it's possible to measure. So you've got it there, and you can go back to the data and you can look at the trends. But in terms of reporting, I would try and keep it topical. So Justin and I were at a bank yesterday, and we'd helped them design their board pack about a year ago, but the finance people were saying, well, it's transformed the quality of debate there. But actually, a lot of the messages now are the same. The rate of change, isn't that high. So is there a way in which we could include something much more topical, which varies on a month by month basis, to keep the level of interest up and actually allow us to dig into the detail from time to time?
There is the full management accounting principles, a very long document that you're not being given today. You are being given a nice light exec summary to take home, but you can go and have a download of that on our website. And in it, we apply the principles to the control cycle, and a big part of what we talk about is data planning. And exactly that, it's about the cascade, the alignment to strategic objectives, the cascade, and then the renewal and flexibility of making sure that they continue to be the right ones, but also making sure that you are planning for the data so that it's there, because so often what we see in organisations is them deciding sort of after the event, oh, we really would have liked to have measured this, and now it's very difficult for us to find that. So yeah, I would agree, dashboardable size number of KPIs, and then plan for those ahead of time so that you're drawing in that data for everyone.
And I think that goes into what Simon was introducing in some of the visualisation techniques, is taking multiple data sets to create a visual that will give you a lot of different information, but actually in one snapshot, which I think was something I was going to ask you about, Andrew, is how you feel visualisation can help.
I think actually, I was thinking about this, the most powerful thing, I think, is it makes you look forward. It makes you not just look at what has happened and what is happening, but what is going to happen. If you look at a trend chart and it ends in wherever we are, October now, I guess people are doing their October reporting. Well, where are we going for the year end, and how credible is that? We do a lot of work around that wind tunnel fan chart, windsock chart that Simon built up, and that's probably the most powerful analysis around a forecast that a CFO can see to give them confidence that the numbers are credible and that they're not going to have a sort of surprise. But by the time it's too late to do anything about it. So it's providing that early warning, I think, is the key thing that visualisation enables people to do.
There's McKinsey research recently that showed that they analysed board agendas, and I think it shows something shocking, like about 70 to 90% of a board agenda typically looks at how the organisation has performed. And they're just not yet spending enough time on looking at future performance. And then we wonder why we have all sorts of corporate scandals reoccurring. And so anything that the finance function can do to support that and to try and drive future-looking data onto the board agenda, the better.
I think we've all been in that embarrassing board meeting where you presented that horrific table of numbers, and one of your non-execs who comes along 3 or 4 times a year spots the fact that your year to go, there's a particular year to go number which doesn't make any sense, and you haven't spotted it because you put together this 50 data point table and he spotted it, and that's when you're really caught short. And I think anything that you can do which creates, which genuinely communicates those points very obviously before you get to that stage, I think would all save us a few sleepless nights. So I think it's about making sure that the tools fit to identify the real problem areas before you get caught out by your non-exec director.
Great, thank you. Now, I'm very conscious of time. We have one more question over here.
none of the organisations that I've been part of. Although we've made steps in the right direction, but it's a constant ongoing process. I think an important point is this is not a quick fix. This takes time. And I think one of the challenges that we often face, people are very jaded from, aborted projects. We put all that effort in and it came to nothing. We just found in the end it was too complicated. Projects that overran, projects that were hugely over budget, ultimately didn't deliver the benefit they were expected to. So people are naturally cynical. I think we're fighting that baggage. So I think it's really important to recognise this is not going to be something we're going to change overnight. But let's deliver some kind of hurdles along the way and feed back to the business. Look at the benefit this piece of work can bring. Because I don't think you're going to get there automatically overnight. But I think we have to go with the mindset of what can we deliver to our business that really makes a difference. We presented a data warehouse proposal to our retail guys globally back in June. And there was a huge amount of enthusiasm coming out of that meeting. Wow, this would transform our ability to interact with retailers, having real-time data for their store on a tablet in store, being able to compare how they performed against the rest of the market. In reality, we're at least 12 months away from being there. But we're being able to communicate to them on a quarterly basis, we've got this far, we've got this far. We've managed to put, firstly, all of our tens of thousands of diamonds into a single data warehouse. That's a good start. And then we can actually start to show them the progress that's being made. So I think you've got to bring the business with you. The honest answer is I've never worked in an organisation that's done it well, but I hope we're slowly moving towards it.
I do quite a lot of try and do quite a lot of case study based research, so I'm always out there looking for organisations that are exemplars, and what I'm always surprised by is big organisations which you would expect to be doing things very, very well will often say to us, we need your help. Actually, we've got pockets of excellence, but because we've grown through acquisition and we've inherited legacy systems and legacy cultures and things like that, that actually we're not uniform across the board. But there are two groups of people that I speak to who will unanimously agree that nobody does it as well as they need them to, and that's the investment community, investors, and audit committees and audit chairs. And I've spoken to about 60 audit committee chairmen of the FTSE All-Share in the last year, and they are all crying out for better information. They find it incredibly difficult to get that direct line of sight over the operations of the organisation that they really feel they need to execute their sort of scrutiny role effectively.
Yeah, I think to give you a number, Thomas, it's probably less than 20% in my experience. I think Naomi's absolutely right that there are generally pockets of excellence in organisations, but there's perhaps a fear of what we present to the board. We've got to present all the numbers, graphs take up a lot of space, they compromise our ability to show the numbers, that kind of thinking, which means that board packs are still, by and large, very number heavy and text heavy at the expense of real insight.
Good. Okay, I'm afraid I'm going to need to wrap up there. So thank you very much to our panel, and we will be giving some information at the end in the packs, which includes the guiding principles that Naomi mentioned, along with some further information about the business performance cycle.
I'd only finish by saying the final 3 points that we would make is if you're looking at a program to actually improve your business performance cycle, there are 3 things that really do matter. The first one is do it in a top-down way. The most important decisions normally are taken at your board and your management team. Start there. That's where you're going to get the biggest bang for buck. Secondly, do it iteratively, because people don't always understand and can't always explain to you the analysis and insight they want to see immediately. And when you start showing them insight, they have lots more questions. So iterate. And finally, don't focus all the investment on huge data lake and warehouse programs, because that's just measurement. Actually look at where your business performance cycle is weakest and start there, because you can probably massively improve it by improving the lowest common denominator. Thank you so much for coming. I hope it hasn't been too hard. Please fill in your feedback forms if you have a moment. Our marketing manager's waving them at me. And when you have finished doing that, please do come through and join us for some drinks afterwards. Thank you.